understanding of the age-old wisdom of Yin and Yang is that it is about the coexistence of seemingly opposing forces, such as day and night, light and dark, loud and quiet, shallow and deep, warm and cold, and even life and death. Based on this understanding, I would say my most recent moment of Yin and Yang was the very moment that I was invited to give this TED Talk. Indeed, about Yin and Yang. Consistent with the Yin and Yang definition, I experienced the coexistence of two seemingly opposing emotions: excitement and terror. So I would be honest and say that all of you in the audience are both my source of excitement and also my source of terror. And that is because I would like to make sure that I do a good job by you. So today, I'd like to talk with you about what I see as another important way that humans can experience an important Yin and Yang moment. And that is the coexistence of emotional pain and emotional growth in the face of trauma. And the possibility of embracing them both, where meaningful life transformation can take place. So this is not a talk about how to not be affected by your trauma. On the contrary, it is a story about people who are quite affected by their trauma, struggling to survive it, struggling to make sense of it. And as a result of that struggle, a new life narrative emerges, something that is academically called post-traumatic growth. As a clinical psychologist, I have been quite fortunate and honored to have witnessed such personal transformations quite regularly, both in my clinical practice and in my research work. I have had opportunities to work with many trauma survivors, and from all walks of life, and from different cultural backgrounds, and also with different types of trauma. I worked with an individual who became paralyzed from the waist down due to a work-related accident that suddenly turned his life upside down. I have interviewed people who lost their loved ones, their homes, and their belongings to a natural disaster. I have worked with women who were rescued from extreme abuse and assault by their human traffickers. I have also worked with adolescents as young as preteens who were bullied and rejected by their peers simply because they were perceived as somehow different. Spanning across different types of trauma and tragedy, across various voices and stories, what I have observed as some of the common themes include excruciating emotional pain, feeling a complete loss of control, feeling a complete overhaul of what they had believed to be true in their lives. One patient of mine described it quite vividly as her mind and her whole body being in this emotional storm with no end in sight. However, over time, something else also emerges. Something that sounds like a new life narrative of positive changes and growth after such trauma. Research on post-traumatic growth has suggested that it is not about the type of trauma that can facilitate the process of growth. what event is traumatic is quite personal to the person experiencing it. Rather, one main element in such event is that the event got them to deeply challenge and question their core beliefs and core values about who they are, about how they have lived their lives, and about the world around them. And a lot of these beliefs have gone unexamined and unchallenged for a long time before the traumatic event. It is also not about any characteristics of trauma survivors that make growth happen. So I think it is safe to say that everyone can experience growth after trauma. Research has suggested that the process of growth after trauma can manifest in changes in trauma survivors in one or more of these 5 ways. 1, how some people start to view themselves as stronger than they thought they were for getting through such trauma. 2, how some people begin to cherish their interpersonal relationships more and begin to feel closer to people around them. 3, how some people start to see new possibilities in life that they may not have seen before the trauma. 4, how some people start to experience enhanced appreciation for life. Some people with a near-death experience describe it as being given a second chance at living and being given the opportunity to reprioritize important things in their lives and start to not take things for granted. And 5, how some people describe it as a deeper connection with their spirituality, which may or may not include religion. A deeper connection with spirituality can lead to an increased empathy for people in general, both people that we know and people that we don't know. Culture has a lot to do with how people express their growth after trauma. One Cambodian research participant described it to me by using a Cambodian saying or expression to describe his trauma experience as having a broken courage. And he described his growth after trauma as having a renewed courage. And to him, the renewed courage feels quite different from the courage he had known before the trauma. And he described it as the courage that is less reckless, less untouchable, but more about the courage to move forward with his life despite being touched by his trauma. Everyone's journey to growth after trauma is quite unique and personal, very different. But one key element that seems to help place people on the road to growth is the element of acceptance. Accept that trauma had happened. Accept that their lives have been affected by it in significant ways. Accept their vulnerability without trying to run away from it. Also accept and honor all the emotions that emerge in response to trauma. This type of acceptance is qualitatively different from feeling fatalistic or feeling defeated or hopeless. It is a type of acceptance that feels calming and grounding, and they're overall feeling okay with the storm, which then in turn helps them to rise above the storm towards healing and growth. Throughout my work with my clients and my research participants, I have learned to listen deeply for the narrative of trauma and pain and the narrative of growth, as they often coexist in subtle ways. And I have been a companion witnessing such personal transformations in wonderful trauma survivors, and somehow I'm indirectly growing along with them. But 3 years ago, I had a direct experience with, I would say, one of my most major Yin and Yang moments in my life, which allowed me to gain a fuller appreciation for the coexistence of growth and pain, and this time of life and death. It was the moment when I was in the hospital with my father during his last days of his fight with cancer. And I was there sitting with him, showing him the first time my newborn daughter, 2 months old, and my 2-year-old son. Looking back at it, I realized that I was right there in the middle of the moment where death and life coexisted right before my eyes. It was quite excruciating to think that my dad, who was my rock and will continue to be in my mind, would not get to see my children grow up. But by accepting that fact, I was able to be more present with him during his last days. And also I was able to start to see a new life narrative for myself as to how I would like to carry on his legacy through my relationship with my kids. And also, as you may recall, that one of the 5 ways that we can experience the post-traumatic growth mindset is the increased ability to see possibilities, new possibilities in life. I believe that one of the ways that I grew from having the experience of my dad's passing was how I was able to see a new opportunity to move to a new country like Vietnam and to join a new university and to help develop a new psychology program. And most importantly, it allowed me to be able to say yes to this TED Talk invitation, despite feeling excited and somewhat terrified. And also to have an opportunity to share with you all today about the importance of listening to and honoring the coexistence of emotional pain and emotional growth within yourselves and in people around you. Thank you very much.